Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's NATS chat. I am so privileged and honored to be here with my esteemed colleagues, Cynthia Vaughn, Michelle Markwart Deveaux, and Nate Plummer. Thank you, the three of you, for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Glad to be.
We are going to discuss running private businesses, Voice Teachers is running private business studios, and it's kind of a carryover from my conversation with Cynthia last March. And we had such a dynamic and wonderful conversation, and you are welcome to go and watch the archive on nats.org. You can find all of our archives. But Cynthia, let's start with you because you're going to review a little bit about that chat, and then we'll move forward tonight.
Yeah, I actually went back just actually this afternoon and listened back to that chat, and what I was really struck by is the number of just really terrific questions, specific questions that people had that had a lot to do with what I call the nuts and bolts, the specific things about how to run your music studio as a business. And so a lot of that information is still there. And again, thank you for asking those terrific questions. But the gist of that, and I've written some internotes articles about this, is basically the who, what, where, and when. And I still stick by that the very first thing that I encourage people to do, whether they're starting a brand new studio or they are trying to think, what do I want to do next, is who do I want to teach, what do I want to teach, and that's that specialization that I'll talk about in just a second. Where becomes part of that as well. When, when do you want to teach? And we'll also touch quite a bit tonight, especially with my guests, our guests, on the how. As I was mentioning to Kari, there comes a time for a lot of voice teachers where you've been doing the same thing for a long time. In my case, I've been teaching since I was at graduate school and college. So I've been teaching voice for 35 years. I'm a very different teacher now than I was certainly 35 years ago. I'm a very different teacher than I was 10 years ago. And there comes a point for a lot of us where you just start to get a little itchy for some kind of change. You don't necessarily want to step out of this profession and go do something completely different. But you want to do something within this profession that will keep you energized and give you maybe a little bit different focus. And so I was thinking about this, and I was actually waxing a little philosophical on Facebook today, and I wrote, it's okay to reinvent the wheel sometimes, because sometimes the wheel that's on your car isn't taking you where you want to go, or it doesn't fit the car that you're driving. And maybe I was thinking of cars because I just drove 3 hours from our NATS event. But two ways that your studio, your business, can change is you can go big, which could mean a lot of different things. You could branch out into a big multi-studio teacher like Sharon Savansky has done. You could add more teachers. You could decide, hey, I want to work with large groups of people and do workshops and seminars. I want to do a lot of group teaching on the web. The other way that you can change your studio business model is you can shrink it, and you can actually make more money working with fewer voice students, working with fewer clients. And you're going to definitely be hearing about some of that tonight. And I did want to mention, just so it doesn't get missed in our conversation, as an example, I want to also mention that you can narrow your focus. Right? You could be a generalist who teaches everybody. You could be someone who decides, hey, I'm just going to work with emerging artists. In the classical world, you could work with singer-songwriters. You could be like Nikki Loney, who says, hey, I'm really good teaching children, and she has some fabulous resources. So that's just kind of, those are kind of my thoughts to kind of kick off a discussion. And the main theme is, what next?
I love that. Thank you. What a great way to launch us tonight. I'm sure people are already thinking of several questions. So NATS chatters, remember this is your chat, and the four of us could easily chat away this hour, but we really want to take your questions. You can either ask, you can raise your little virtual hand in the control panel box, and I can open your microphone. Or in the questions box, simply send me a question and then I'll read it at the appropriate time. So one of the things I have to say that's been so exciting getting ready for this chat is exploring your guys' websites. And again, I refer to our pre-chat the other day because as you talk about a car analogy, Cynthia, I love my car. I didn't really think I needed a new car, but suddenly I'm interested in the new model. So Nate, why don't you talk a little bit about your model and of teaching?
Sure. So I am a musical theater voice teacher and audition coach, and I am based in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is not a logical place for a musical theater voice teacher. There's not a huge demand here, so I teach primarily online. I totaled the numbers right before our chat. I currently teach students in 32 states, and in the last 2.5 years have taught just over 3,000 online lessons over Skype. So online lessons to me have been my studio model from day one. I opened my business in June of 2015, and really didn't know anything about online lessons when I started, but I knew with my lifestyle at the time I was working as a professional actor, so I knew I wasn't going to be able to lock down a particular location or having an in-person studio. And I didn't have a ton of in-person studio teaching experience, so the online setup to me just made sense, and I was able to focus on just teaching what I felt I needed to teach rather than shaping the online lesson setup to be really anything parallel to an in-person lesson, because they're totally different. And you have to just focus on your job, which is teaching the student in front of you. And if you can do that, and that's your primary goal, online lessons or in-person lessons are a perfect opportunity for both.
I love that. Thank you. And we will definitely have lots of questions for you. And I want to just lead Michelle into the conversation, but as I do so, I just have to say that Shannon Coates from Canada has just messaged us all that she loves seeing a whole bunch of her favorite people in one place.
We love you.
Hi, Shannon! And she'll be one of my guests on teaching children to sing later this spring. So Michelle, you have what you're calling, I believe, a boutique model and value-based pricing, right? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Right. So I don't really like the word boutique, but it just fits the fact. So I teach a few students, and I really invest heavily in all of the aspects of their training. And instead of paying for an hourly time slot with me, they're paying to be in my studio. However, that works out. So I like to say I don't charge for my time. I like to say I charge for what I can give them and who I am as a person and how I can bring them into the next level of their training. I would say the through line of my students is people who enjoy having a close relationship with their voice teacher, someone who looks at their teacher as a partner rather than just kind of a person they go to and then leave. I'm really good with that. And speaking to what Cynthia was saying, pardon me, is I made that change because I was at an hourly model, a time-based model, and I was finding myself just overworking for all of my clients. And I was getting very tired. It was taking a toll on my family. It was taking a toll on my personal performing. And I was going above and beyond because that's just the personality I am. And I realized that what I could do is actually cut back my studio hours and really give what I wanted to give to each student. I work really well with people who like to be on journeys. So value-based is just a term that means you're paying for everything that you're getting, and you're paying for an experience, and you're paying for plus the information, but you're paying for the whole package. You're not just paying for whatever information you get in a certain amount of time.
Michelle,
because I have a few students. So for me, full is 10 to 12 students.
and I would love to know what inspired you to even come up with that idea. That it just fascinates me.
Well, I read a book called, and it's, oh, I should have linked to it here, but it's a book called Breaking the Time Barrier, and I'm happy to, I'm sure there's a way I can post that on, like give it to you, Cynthia, to post. But this book is totally not about voice lessons in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
But it talks about this idea of creating packages for your services and creating experiences for your clients, because that's what you're doing anyway as a service-based industry. And it took a really long time for me to figure out how that worked in the voice teacher world. I had a lot of mishaps and a lot of learning. But I read that book and I was like, this is me. This is who I am as a person. This is who I am as a teacher. And that just got me creating and figuring out and experimenting with my students. And because I had created that relationship with my clientele already, it was very, very easy to transfer over. In fact, I personally, now not everyone will have this experience, but I personally had the experience where I sat all of my families down. I said, this is what we're going to do from now on. You're going to pay a monthly retainer instead of a per lesson fee, and that monthly retainer is going to cover whatever we decide. So we're going to sit down, and this is what I do with all my clients now, and create packages about the experience that they want from the studio, and they pay monthly. And if they're here 3 times, or if they're here 6 times, or if they have an audition, or we have to do extra work or less work, then that works out. And every single one of them said, finally, thank goodness, yes. And many of them, they wound up saving money, to be honest, because they were coming in for, you know, high school, right? They're coming in for callback lessons and special lessons to record college auditions and special time, you know, all these extra things that they were paying for anyway. I just included all of that within the packages as we went through. So does that answer your question a little bit about what sparked my interest in that?
It does, absolutely. I just always love to trace ideas like that back, because it's so not anything I've ever heard of. And it's interesting, and you're having such success. Are you finding other people moving to a model such as yours?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's a scary model. Like, you first introduce it and people are like, you're crazy. There's no way that's going to work. And when, you know, like with the coaching clients that I work with in the voice teacher world, we just start really thinking outside the box, and then slowly they get it, and as they get it, they're like, this is what I'm doing anyway. Because I think what happens is every voice teacher knows that they're doing so much more than whatever's in that face-to-face time. You all are. You're all amazing teachers. Of course you're doing more than whatever's in that face-to-face time. But maybe not everybody is realizing how to actually get compensated for that. And I believe that when we get fairly compensated for the work and the investment we're giving into our students, then it makes us better teachers, because it lowers our resentment level, and it lowers our resistance to providing service to our clients. And then we just become better teachers because we're happy to do it instead of irritated about it.
Interesting. And yeah, let me just say, Shannon has piped in that she is actually moving, or has moved towards this model. And somebody else also, Priscilla, I've been doing this with my professional clients for years. They pay for access to me, not just my time. So I'm still, I have to say, I've had a private studio for 35 years, and I'm still having a challenge, Michelle, totally realizing or understanding exactly what that would look like logistically. So I'm thrilled that others are already implementing it.
And that's what the handout is for, is just to kind of start giving people an idea of what, because it does take time. You can't just be like, I'm going to change over, and then it's like magic. It's like you have to really take time to think, what is this going to look like in my life? How is it going to affect my studio and my students? So I guess I can refer to that, and then I don't. This could take up a whole chat just in and of itself, so I want to make sure that.
Yes, and for the future, we might want to look at that. And attendees, there is a handout attached. Again, in your control panel, you should see the handout to which Michelle's referring. Cynthia, go ahead. Sorry.
I wanted to mention that the model that Michelle is talking about, I've been familiar with that model because I'm involved in a lot of small business organizations. I mean, from the Chamber of Commerce to things like that. And so it wasn't unusual, but what was unusual about it is that it was applied to the voice teacher world. And I think there are a lot of things that are happening out there, trends in the business world, that if we just take a look at what's working for dry cleaners, what's working for other businesses, and is there a way to apply that to teaching voice? I mean, there are so many things that are just new that didn't exist 10 years ago. I mean, what's Uber? I mean, things like that didn't exist 10 years ago. And so I think that is something we can do, is just stay on top of the trends. And certainly one of the trends is the teaching online, like Nate is doing. And how can we maybe steal like an artist and use some of these ideas in our businesses?
Well, we borrow from sports science, or borrow. We are educated from sports science to do what we now do. I mean, none of us would be doing the work we're doing without that influence. So it definitely makes sense. Michelle, we have a question from Karen O'Connor. How would that model work when a teacher doesn't have professional students but lots of casual singers?
I'm not sure it would. No, I'm going to amend my conversation. So I'm going to think on the fly here. I think you change the parameters of the package. So for example, I mean, I don't have all professional students. I do have, but interestingly enough, my professional track students actually wind up being on lower cost packages than the students who are more like pre-professional and high school. Those are kind of my top, the people I spend the most with, right? Because they have a very specific goal that takes a lot of time. Where casual, I do have 2 casual singers, and 1 adult and 1 kid, and they're just on, hey, you come 30 minutes and that's what you want, and then their extras are a lot lower. So they will, like, they're not on a package where I pay for language coaching for them, right? They'll pay for their own language coaching if I feel that they have to go out for that. They also will be, I would say for a casual student, maybe you could also change the way that you view the time. Like maybe they come bi-weekly, right? Semi-monthly, something. Or they can just pay a really low rate and then they can pick whenever they want to come. Right?
And just to let you know, Karen, Kelly Barham has typed in that it does work, that she does that. So, and I assume by casual, I call them avocational singers, so I assume that's what we're talking about.
Like one-offs. Like I have a client who just wants to come once a month. They're they. Okay, I mean, and we talk through that, right? You talk through why is it good to be gone, or why is it okay to only come once a month, or not okay? And I don't let every client do that.
Right.
Some clients okay, you have a lot of training in your background, you just want to keep your chops up, all of that, sure, no problem. And other clients, it's like, no, I'm sorry, you're a beginner and I don't feel ethical about only having 1 lesson with you a month and calling that voice lessons for you. So,
well, like you said, it's individual packages. That's the whole point of what you're doing.
Exactly.
So, yeah, let's. I want to take it back to Nate for a moment. Karen Michaels has asked to know more about the platform that you use, and how he does lessons. So can you walk us through both of those a little bit further?
So I primarily use Skype. What I like about Skype is that it's pretty standard across multiple different devices. And you can have it on Windows, you can have it on Mac, you can have it on tablets and phones and computers. And I think that accessibility really is a huge advantage over some of the other video conferencing softwares. Skype does tend to update very frequently. I will say that is one of the downfalls, is that if maybe I've updated and the student hasn't, we do have to play that game. That is a very, very common occurrence, but it's written in my studio policies that students have to log in 10 minutes before the start of their lesson and check and do the update if they need to. So there's a lot of pre-planning in an online lesson that maybe isn't so much a factor in in-person lessons, as far as on both sides, planning on both sides for the student and for the teacher. I have used Zoom, I have used Google Chat, FaceTime, all of them, and from a user-friendly standpoint from the student side, Skype is still king, in my opinion.
Oh, that's interesting. I hear a lot about Zoom and the few. I don't do a lot of this type of lesson, but I do some, and I have switched to Zoom just because I found the connection was better, the sound quality. So, and I've read a lot of people have said that. So I'm so fascinated to hear that you're still liking the Skype platform. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah.
I want to mention, when you mentioned the convenience factor for Skype, I feel the same way about using PayPal. I mean, people will say, oh, well, there are ways that won't charge you as much, and you know what? So many people have PayPal that I stick with PayPal because it's convenient for my students.
Yeah.
I feel like PayPal is a necessary evil.
Yes.
Rather than Venmo?
Well, technically, Venmo, they're just starting to switch over, but technically, if you're a business owner, you shouldn't be using Venmo.
Yeah. Because?
It is not built for business. So there are certain costs that we incur. Cynthia, you step in if you feel that I'm erroneous in this. There's certain costs that we choose to incur when we choose to own a business, and one of those costs is transferring money to and from our business and our clients. And so PayPal takes care of that service for us and makes that easy for us. Venmo is not designed for that service. So
I think if you read the fine print on Venmo, it clearly states it's not to be used to pay it person to person. It's
they're starting to dabble in the business thing. That's recent. I don't know enough about that. And Venmo's owned by PayPal.
Yeah.
I know, but people also do like, oh, send money through friends and family. And, you know, for the, like you say, Cynthia, for the convenience, 2.9% plus 30 cents is fine. You know, you're going to pay that with Stripe, you're going to pay it with Square, you're going to pay it with Wave invoicing. And it's just, in my opinion, it's just the right thing to do. You chose to own a business, so you choose to incur those business costs. And you can expense them. You expense them on your taxes. That's how you take care of that.
We've got a few questions coming in. I love that. Thank you, Michelle. I mean, that's what we're here to talk about, too. If we're going to be respected business owners, how do we follow the guidelines necessary to do so? Nate, a couple questions further for you. How do you get around time delay? And let me look at somebody's asked what your teaching website is. And why don't you talk about, I knew this would come up, do you use special equipment for Skype lessons as far as outside microphones and speakers, or do you just use those built into the computer? So let me answer have you answer those.
Well, I'll start with the time delay. The answer is it keeps getting smaller and smaller. It has cut itself in half since I started teaching online lessons. It used to be 3 seconds. Skype now, on its best day, has it down to 1.5 seconds, which is very impressive. I mean, considering everything that we're trying to send. It won't ever match an in-person. So the trick is, again, that planning ahead. Pre-recorded tracks are, to me, not a downfall. I know a lot of teachers are really setting that students need to learn to sing with a live accompanist, and as a musical theater teacher and audition coach, I fully agree, but more and more productions are using click tracks, especially at the high school and collegiate level, so students need to learn to sing with that. I also love being able to kind of play the mind game with my students of messing with them. So I will have a pre-recorded track that they will get very used to using, and then the day of, in the Dropbox chat, I will send them a new audio file and say, this is what we're singing with today. And that's to help them simulate an audition experience, which if I was accompanying them live, my instincts would be to follow them. And even if I wanted to be very strict with it, I would just take over trying to follow. So what it really allows me to do as someone who's not an accompanist is actually focus on listening to my students while they're singing rather than worrying about playing. So the accompaniment situation, it's pre-recorded tracks all the way. When we're doing exercises, I do have pre-recorded tracks for those. I use about 10 different patterns that I do in my lessons, and I have them all recorded for the various registrations, and those are sent over Dropbox, so students can just open those up and sing with them, which is fantastic because then they have them to practice with, because we all know as teachers, if they don't have something to practice those exercises with, they probably won't get practiced in some way, shape, or form, especially the younger kids. So I've noticed a huge increase in success in exercises since I added that just as a factor. But I will also do it completely as an ear training exercise and just play the chord, and then they can sing it back. And my students that do online lessons, I'm very pleased to say, have very, very good intonation skills because of that. So I think that was the time delay. As far as equipment, I have all the fancy equipment, and to be honest, just like what Michelle has, nice fancy microphones and everything, my stuff all sits in my closet, because I found I had way more issues from the technological side when I had my fancy speakers and my mixer and my microphones than I did when I just used my computer. So when I am doing master classes or workshops or auditioning somewhere, I will just totally do a lesson off of my iPad, and the audio quality is just as good. I've asked my students if they have a preference, and they said they can't tell the difference. So I hear things just fine. I had my MacBook built with as many kind of features as I could when I upgraded my Mac. But I do sometimes will wear headphones if I'm really listening for something. But most of the time, it's just like what we're doing right now for this chat. It's just the microphone that I have, and I go from there.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Can I ask a question? Is that okay for me to ask a question?
Of course.
So Nate, do you find, because I find it depends on the demographic of student that I'm working with, what equipment I go ahead and turn on and off. Does it matter? Because like the classical singers that I work with, I feel like I have to wear my AKG studio headphones to give them the best feedback. But I don't know if that's just me being paranoid and weird.
I will be honest and say I don't teach a ton, and this was something I was thinking about. I don't teach a ton of classical singers. So I do teach primarily musical theater and then pop rock. And I think because those formats traditionally use microphones. In their performance, we get so used to trying to fine-tune their sound to that. I will say that when I have college students that are working on, you know, arias and things like that, yes, I will wear headphones to tap into more fine-tuned things. I know someone had commented in one of the Facebook threads about vibrations, and yes, we will never hear the vibrations, but I do think some of the more overtone acoustical ringing things pick up a little better in the headphones than just my Mac speakers.
Yeah.
How do students find you for online lessons? Advertising, word of mouth, website?
He's a genius.
I have a couple different things. I used to use Thumbtack, and I was a very, very big promoter of Thumbtack. I watched the quotes very, very closely. And before Thumbtack kind of exploded, I got fantastic students. And I will say that the majority of the students I have in my studio are professional actors that were in small areas that didn't know where to look. And so Thumbtack was a great resource for them. But Thumbtack has changed formats, and I'm no longer happy with them. But I also have a YouTube channel. It's called #Backstage with Nate. I get students that come from that, and that is primarily professional acting students that are looking for not only audition coaching and rep coaching, but also the business coaching side. A lot of students from that. I have a very active Instagram account and have a lot of students that have come to me from that, posting things on there. I have a very active social media presence, which is something that I'm very proud of, with motivational videos on Mondays with the word of the week and quotes and all that kind of stuff, and that really appeals to a lot of young performers, especially since my target demographic are those students right out of college. So Instagram is like their place. So that has been a huge plus, but also a lot of referrals from other teachers when it comes down to really looking for an audition coach or someone who's, you know, looking to move to that really professional business coaching side too. I get a lot of referrals, so it's kind of a cross of different things.
And I bet you have something on your website where people can sign up to receive.
I do. I have I believe the technical term is called a light box, and it pops up on the screen as soon as you sign up. That says you can sign up for my newsletter and receive all kinds of tips and tricks and things. And it pops up right before the little video that plays, introduction video, on my website that plays. Which tells about my studio and my backstory, and that has been a new feature I added to my website, actually on the suggestion of Michelle. So she can take credit for that little thing.
I love that. I want to bring it back to both Cynthia and Michelle, but Jerry has typed in that many of his clients now transfer directly to my studio account via an online banking app called Zell, Z-E-L-L-E.
Oh, yeah.
Which is free to both sender and receiver, and a very popular method of a payment for clients and parents. So are you all familiar with that? Have you heard of it?
I mentioned when I did the last business chat, I was mentioning different ways that students can pay us, but one of the ways that I mentioned was Chase Quick Pay, which at that time was through Clear Exchange. Now they're using a different network, and I don't know if Clear Exchange turned into Zell or if Z-E-L-L-E, or if it's a different company. But it's the same type of thing where it's a service that a lot of the major banks use, and even if you don't use one of those major banks, your bank you can still send and receive money through that. And so I don't use Zell, it's still called Chase Quick Pay because that's my bank, but I don't use it very much for my students. Occasionally someone will say, oh, do you have this? Can I pay you this way? But I do use it to pay my teachers. So I'm not writing checks and tracking them down because all of the teachers are not in the studio on the, on the same day at the same time. And so I used to have to mail their checks, which is annoying because nobody likes to wait for your money. So now at the end of each month when I'm paying the teachers, I just go bloop, bloop, bloop with my phone, and it is sent through Chase QuickPay via Zell. So I think it's pretty cool. I like it.
Okay. So do any of you accept checks from your clients anymore?
Oh, sure. I'll take money. I'll take cash.
Any way you want to give it to me.
Yes, but I prefer.
You may have said this, I'm sorry if I missed it, but for those of you who are using PayPal, do you then pass on those fees to the client themselves, or you?
Nope.
No.
It's
Tax deduction.
Yeah, if I could say, for me, I made a choice not to nickel and dime my clients. If there are small things, it just becomes an added value. When I had space in my Colorado studio to have a once-a-month performance class, it was an added value because I paid an accompanist, and the other teachers could come and participate. I didn't pay my teachers for that. It was voluntary. But if you were a current client of Magnolia Music Studio, you could come once a month and you could perform your songs for the other students, get feedback from a teacher, and I want to clarify that for performance classes, I don't want the students picking at each other. It's feedback from one of the teachers where the students can applaud and say positive things. But I didn't charge for that. If you were a guest, I charged $10. And so things like that, if these little $5 and $10 things or $1 here and there, I'm not going to charge extra for that. Some teachers definitely charge a late fee if I don't receive your payment, on the 3rd of the month. I don't charge a late fee. I mean, I don't have much of a problem with that, but I just don't want to nickel and dime my clients.
I agree.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, Michelle, did you start to say something?
I was just going to say, I agree. Like, be responsible, figure out how much it's going to cost to run your business to give the level of service that you want to do it, and then charge accordingly. Whether you choose to do that hourly, break that into an hour or a monthly or punch cards or semesters, however you choose your pricing, your fee structure to be, just figure out what you need to make. And I think because ultimately one of the only things that we have that can be different, all of our information is the same, potentially, right? Potentially every teacher can know what they need to know. They can go to school for it. They can go and sit in on another teacher's studio if they'll let them. They can go and do an internship. They can get master's degrees. They can read so many books, right? So the information is just one way that we differentiate ourselves, right? Another way is what is our customer service like? Ultimately, we're there for our clients. We're there for our students, right?
I think so.
I mean, I just think it's nice, right? Like, I love that. How much value added for Cynthia's students to just be like, wow, and I get to sing with a live accompanist in front of a bunch of people and get performance experience, and that's part of my lessons? Yeah! That's awesome!
The payback on that is, guess which students do the best when they are auditioning for their high school musical, or they're going to NATS, or they're auditioning for colleges. You can bet it's the ones that have taken advantage of having that opportunity to get up in front of people and perform regularly. And then that becomes advertising.
Michelle, we have a question from Jerry. So if you have a serious high school student who is working toward applying for colleges, what would that typical package include?
It depends on student. Totally honestly, it depends on student. I always give 3 options. So whenever a student comes to me and says, we have my most expensive and longest lesson is the initial intake lesson. And half of it is singing, so they can see how and I am very much a judge of fitting with them as they are with me, fit is really important to me because I think it gets things done faster, more efficiently. So the bottom package would be all of the vocal training needed for whatever that they were pursuing, depending on the genre, right? So if they're only musical theater, then I would not include things like French and German art song, right? I do make every student in high school learn an Italian art song, just because it's good for them.
Finish.
Right? And I'm an old biddy, right? You will learn the Italian art song. So everyone has to learn. What?
And some colleges still ask you to do it if you're going for a music theater program.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Also, I want them to have just one thing that they can like make $100 at a church for. You know? So I do that, or an oratorio piece, a Latin piece, right? So just one thing where they could just make a little extra money if they if they needed to, right? So there's that, and then the lowest one would be all of that training plus all of the online resources that I provide as well. I have like a whole set of podcasts of warm-ups and all of that, resume development, you know, looking over it, making sure it's fine and pretty, and then probably recording the pre-screen, right? The middle package would be all of that, plus live accompanist. I'm paying for finding them the right accompanist that they feel good about, and I have 3 or 4 of them that I work with. More specific on rep development, so I'm going through and picking most of their rep rather than them picking their rep, even though I strongly believe in students picking their own rep also. I feel that needs to be a conversation, not me just handing, you know, things out. I'm thinking off the top of my head here. I'm sorry if it's a little scattered.
You're doing great.
Top packages would probably be you're in here twice a week, and one is focused just on the technical aspects, and the other one is focused on performance aspects, where we're coaching the actual performances. We're doing acting technique. We're also doing monologues in addition to the singing stuff. Top package would also be me taking care of every little detail about pre-screens, double checking, looking over applications, making sure, reaching out to the schools that I already know. So if I know staff at the schools, reaching out and saying, is everything still on schedule? Is that, you know, kind of being a touch-base person for them. I'm trying to think what else would be on like a top package. I usually build the fanciest package first for that student. I dream big. I'm like, if money was not an object for this family, because I can't make decisions about how other people are going to spend their money. So I'm just like, okay, if the sky's the limit, this is what I could do, and then I do, you know, I cut back from there. Did that answer your question, Jerry?
He'll let me know. And Michelle, I assume, do they sign a 12-month contract or?
Well, about that. So I have, I recently, interestingly enough, have gotten a bunch of like junior college students who are like, I'm ready to transfer to a 4-year. Can you get me ready in 3 months? And I say I can do my darndest. And so those contracts will sometimes be 3 months. If it's someone just coming out of the gate, it has to be 6 months, because just to start, and then we revisit at the end of 6 months. We figure it out. Did this work? Is this the direction we're going? Are there tangible action items that we accomplished? I test music theory at the beginning and the end to make sure if that's in their package, if they want that, because it's something that I want them to go to college with. You know, God forbid some high schooler knows how to read music when they go into college. So let's see. So 6 months would be like a normal, but I do tend to get the shorter packages. Also, if I have someone who's coming from me for a specific reason, because I fill a gap in their teachers, like the teacher that they're working with. So I have several clients where they have a teacher, I know that person, they're a friend of mine, and they say, Michelle is who you should go to for this specific thing. And that I will put together packages just for that thing, right? So it's usually an audition that has to do with pop, rock, jazz, or musical theater from a teacher who is an amazing classical teacher. And then I just keep in touch with the teacher. How's this going? I make sure that I use the language that that teacher, you know, we have a little pre-meeting, all of that. And so those are different kinds of packages where those would be more like a number of lessons, but I always give 3 options: the best, the medium, and then bare minimum. What I think, what I would feel ethical at the bare minimum.
Jerry says amen to you, to your comment about sending high school kids to college that can read music. And to the other, he says, yes, thank you. You answered his question. I have a question for you. Do you ever, I'm not sure how to say this, but with 10 to 12 clients that you take on at a time, do you ever miss being able to positively influence more than that in a given month? I mean, I know people can do one-offs with you, but
they can.
But as a general rule, you're seeing 10 to 12.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I have made myself available for workshops and master classes, right? So, it's so funny. But like Cynthia, you were saying earlier, you know, one of the things I did was I made my studio smaller, but then I decided to start putting myself out there and be like, you know what? I've been directing musical theater for like a gazillion years. Well, not a gazillion, but you know, I've been working with groups as a director, a vocal director, and a music director for so long. Why don't I just offer to do this also in voice? And I had some amazing NATS members just be like, sure, we'll give you a chance. And I've learned a lot of things. And I'm getting better and better at that and having more opportunities there. So I guess I miss not influencing a lot of people, but I don't miss always feeling like I wasn't giving them my best self. I don't miss that.
Great answer.
There would always be a time where I was like, that person didn't get everything they could have gotten out of me today. And that just, for me, wasn't a good fit.
So NATS chatters, we're at the 10-minute warning. So please, if you have questions with my esteemed guests, we have a wealth of knowledge sitting on this panel. Nate, let me come to you for a minute while we wait for them to think of brilliant questions. Let me play devil's advocate. I'm sure you hear people's comments about online lessons, right? And I would think more towards classical singers would have more of strong opinions about that. But how do you respond to those comments?
I think it depends on what their concerns are. And if it's a concern of that they feel that they can't replicate an in-person experience, then my answer is you're right, you can't. It's never going to be the same. And I personally take pride in the fact that my lessons are so laid back that because of the online thing, I can literally turn off my camera and students that are dealing with performance anxiety can sing and not even see me. I can do things in an online setup that would never happen in an in-person studio. And the reverse is true too. There are things in an in-person studio that would never be able to happen online. But it's what, like I said when we started, it's what do you do for the student that's in front of you while you're teaching them. And everything that I have changed in my studio has always been what is going to make their experience what they need, not what I need. And that, as from a logic standpoint, everything I was trying to figure out, because I came into teaching, actually my degree is in theater education. So I started without any real formal studio training. I had taken lessons myself. But when I first started my studio, had no formal training in PED. So I really didn't have any expectations. And I think that really set me up for success because I wasn't looking at it from the little box. And I think that's the first thing I would say to anyone who is hesitant to start online lessons is to break out of the box, and instead of saying, what can't I do, look at it and say, what can I do?
Yes, Cynthia.
When you ask that question, which is how would you respond to criticism about whatever, blah, 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 the first thing that popped into my head like a big blazing neon sign was, how would I respond to criticism about the way I do my business? Don't. It is so easy to get into arguments about anything with people who are never, ever, ever going to understand what you do or appreciate it for what it is. And rather than waste all of that energy and angst trying to explain what any of us do with our individual, independent businesses, rather than defending and just going on the, being defensive and feeling like we have to justify what we're doing. How would you respond to that criticism? Don't.
I love that you
do what you do and do it well.
I love that you put voice to exactly what I was thinking as Nate started to speak, because you can tell there was no defensiveness. You must have been asked this many times, or people have questioned you. But with all three of you tonight, I think what to me is really standing out is the confidence with which you've chosen to run your business without defensiveness. So I love that, Cynthia, for bringing that up.
So I make mistakes. I've had some brilliant ideas. I've had some really dumb business ideas that I thought were going to be great, and they didn't work. And it's like, okay, well, let's try something different. And I think you need to give yourself permission to do that. Try things. Figure out who you want to teach, who you don't want to teach, how you want to teach. And I think the most important thing is keep teaching. You have something that's really valuable and really rare. Do you know how many people out there would love to be able to sing?
Or love to be able to do what we do and make a living at it. Yeah. And I love that Karen O'Connor has echoed what I said, Cynthia. She says, that's a great bit of wisdom. Thank you. We are getting a few questions. Oh, and Shannon Coates, of course. Yes, go Cynthia. Thank you, Shannon. We're getting... Okay, so let me read this. So also from our darling Shannon, not really a question, she says, more a comment. I'm just so impressed by the level of intentionality that each of these teachers have put into developing their studios and teaching structures. As someone who came to teaching with no intentionality whatsoever and then spent a lot of time in school getting academic degrees, I find myself playing a whole lot of catch-up in terms of understanding myself as a teacher. And so I just find these things incredibly inspiring. And Shannon, thank you also. Like Cynthia, you've put to voice what I was thinking the last few days. And I agree, I'm somebody who spent a lifetime in academic as a student. And you know, we follow the traditions, especially in classical music. We follow traditions. That's what our profession requires in so many ways. So I find this inspiring as well. So thank you, Shannon. There was a really brilliant question here from Jonathan from Michelle. With regards to your pricing, do you have a fixed rate for each thing that you do for a student? Is there some formula you use for putting together pricing for a package? Great.
That is such a great question. Oh, I love that question. No. It's totally no, but here's why it's a good question, because I started out doing that. And I started out really trying to, like, you know, some people, I know Shannon does this, I'm gonna call her out. I literally would sit down and I'd be like, okay, email $5, like just for myself, not for them, not for the client at all, but just like, okay, how would I value this? And, you know, I'll be totally honest with you. It got to a point where I said, how much money would make me not be mad that I had to do this?
Hmm.
And that's how I did it.
Hmm.
Then after that, I added 20% because that's kind of a little business thing. It's an idea because we tend to always undervalue our own. We always undervalue our own services. So it's kind of a rule of thumb. Whatever you think the good number is, add 20%, right? Then I did market research. Okay, how far above the market or below the market, or because it's also important to not be below the market because that's not fair to your other teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And if I may be so bold, I would beg all teachers in academia who teach also independently, please price in the market. Please don't say, oh, well, I also have a salary, so I don't need to charge so much. Yes, you do, because you're undercutting your independence. Please don't undercut your independence. You know, charge what you're worth to academics so that your independents can charge what they're worth. So then I did the market research and said, how much is this going to be above or below? And then I came up with happy medium. So my packages tend to be around the same 3 price points, but again, very personalized. And I also offer scholarships. I do something that I call pricing for generosity. So I know that there are people in my life who can absolutely afford what I charge for the level of service that they want to get, and that affords me the opportunity to make my numbers and to make what I've decided I would like my profit to be, while still offering scholarships and savings packages to people who have just the same amount of drive and wherewithal, but maybe are at a different budget.
Mm-hmm. Great. We have a big question here with not much time, but let me just read it. From Wendy Jones. Since the last NATS chat on this topic, I've grown my business and been music teacher's helper. However, I'm not completely sold on music teacher's helper. Is there another way to have a website hosted and still have an ability to schedule as easily? How do you schedule and keep track of what lessons are happening and when?
I will say, even though I use a music teacher helper sister product, Studio Helper, which I really love, it's for multi-teacher studios. I've been hearing really great things about my music staff, and it is quite a bit less expensive, and it will give her a lot of the same features. I think does it also include the website, Nate?
Yes,
Yeah.
but I don't use it.
Oh. But it sounds like she does want
they're the templates. Just like on Teacher's Helper, they're templates. But what I do use is that you can embed like the registration forms and all of that from my music staff into other sites. So that's
what I do with Studio Helper. I can embed. It just works really, really well with my website and integrates PayPal, but there are some more affordable options, and I would say just check the ones that are out there.
And I'm already hearing from Shannon said she loves music staff, and Valerie Williams says I love my music staff. You can also have a website through them. She doesn't use it, but does use other services. So
I use Acuity.
I do too.
I keep hearing about Acuity.
And it's not for voice, I mean, it's not voice teacher specific or music teacher specific the way the other 2 products are, but I love it. I love it. That's how much I like it, that I love it. You can do forms, you can do packages, you can do coupons, you can create all sorts of different kinds of appointments, you can embed it, you can make it private or public, so you can change your, I just love it.
Wonderful.
Did everybody get that? Acuity.
Acuity,
huh?
Yeah.
Oh, just making sure everybody got the name of that. Acuity.
Yes, ACUITY scheduling.com.
Yep. I think that's right.
From an online lesson standpoint, for me, Acuity has saved me such headaches because it has a time zone feature, which none of the others have really had. And so I can sync my calendars between the different softwares. So I do all of my weekly students in my music staff, and then all of my drop-ins are scheduled through Acuity, and the calendars are synced, and it works really nice that way, so that I don't have to try to worry about students doing time zone changes in their head, me doing time zone changes in my head.
I don't know. Does my music staff and music staff help? Can you pay? Like Acuity, you pay at time. You can pay at time of booking, which is another thing that I adore. Can you?
I think there's a way you can set that up. But
yeah, I do that. I do all my invoicing for my weekly students through my music staff.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I wondered if you would allow me 30 seconds. I just feel just on my heart that I want to share something that happened since our last chat last year. There was a teacher who, a friend, a colleague now, who was inspired by that chat and wanted to just figure out some ways that she could balance her need to perform with having a very, very large, popular voice studio. I mean, she was is doing a wonderful job with her students, and most of them tend to be younger performers, but fabulous teacher, but also an incredible performer. And what she's been able to do since last spring, and I was just the catalyst. We had some long talks over the phone, but she's done it all on her own. She's now had 2 fully professional gigs, out of town music theater gigs. She's received a performing grant of several $1,000s from the local Rotary Club. So she is able to do follow her professional performing dream, and she's able to now be out of town and do online Skype lessons with her families. And it was like Michelle was saying, she just sat down her families and said, I have to follow my passion. I have to follow my heart to perform as well, and this is what I'm going to do. And they're all like, you go, and we'll do the online lessons. And in addition to that, I had suggested that if she could find another teacher who could teach in person at her studio, either subbing or teaching in another room in her house. And it sounds like that is happening too. And it's a former student of hers who is teaching, and she's just ready to just bring her in as part of her studio. And it just makes me really happy, because she was just frustrated to tears because she was a victim of her own success. She is such a good teacher, but it was hurting her because it didn't allow her to perform. And that just makes me so happy.
Oh, thank you. That's a perfect story to end our evening. And I want to tell you that
since you might be out there.
We got a bravo, everyone, from Meredith Dame. Very kind. And other people are now saying thank you. Let me, first of all, thank my incredible guest tonight. Thank you for the generosity of your time tonight, actually. And I think, Cynthia, we've really started something with this yearly let's talk about the business of running a business. So I think we need to continue that every year. I want to remind our NATS chatters that our December 10th chat will be on transgendered voices and what voice teachers need to know. As we all know, this is such a hot topic and an interesting topic. So I hope you'll join us December 10th. Please pre-register. And Sandy Hirsch, who is an SLP that I work with in Seattle, is one of our experts in that. My past student, Emerald Leslie, Dr. Emerald Leslie now, who wrote her dissertation on the topic, will join us, and then Liz Jackson-Hearns, who runs a very successful studio in Chicago. So please join us for that, and thank you guests tonight, and thank you NATS chatters for joining us, and thank you for all the fabulous comments coming in. So we'll wish you all good night now. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Hold on, guests, hold on for just a second, okay?